I want to welcome everybody. This is the first meeting of our June 2019 four-year term, and all of our members are here. And for the record, I'm Jim Shalik, President of the Board. Nahid Kozame is present, Vice President. David Naiman is present, Secretary. Board members Diane Dillon and Elise Barnes are here, and our substitute members Jackie Phillips and Alan Banoff. And the first thing I want to do is welcome our new members, Diane and Elise. Welcome. Even though you're new, as you sit here, we're all equal, and newness is not a reason to be shy or not to participate. You know, we all started as new members, and we're all equal, and welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And we have a quorum. It's June 17th at 2:30, and it's a board meeting of the Montgomery County Board of Elections at the Gaithersburg office of the Board of Elections. So we have a quorum, and we'll begin our meeting. And the first item is approval of minutes. First set of minutes is April 15th, 2019, board meeting. Is there a motion to accept?
I move to accept them as edited.
As amended?
As amended?
Yeah.
Second?
Wasn't here.
You want, is there a second?
Yes. I second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
No.
Anyone opposed? No, that's unanimous. Second set of minutes is April 15th, 2019, executive session. Is there a motion to approve?
I move.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Mr. President, on the agenda is not the June 3rd.
Well, we got to, let me just,
Well, it's not on the agenda, that's why I'm just noting.
what is it?
Yes.
The June 3rd.
Can we finish the April 15th?
Yeah, I just want to do the executive,
okay.
yeah. So it's,
Yeah.
all those in
Sorry.
favor of the April 15th executive session minutes, say aye.
Aye.
No one opposed?
And just so it's clear for the record, there were two sets of executive session minutes. The second set I sent out to the board members who were present, and I assume those are being approved as amended, because I know Mr. Naiman and Mr. Banoff had some edits to them. Is that
Okay.
correct?
All part of the same vote.
Correct.
I also want to welcome all our guests. Dolly Kilday, welcome back, and Barbara Sanders. And our other guests, thank you for coming. Okay, additions to the agenda. On old business, item C, follow up on the minutes committee. We're going to move that to July. Next meeting, okay? All right, so now, Lisa, are there any public comments?
Jim, what are you talking? Where?
No.
Page second.
No,
Old business.
Okay.
ABC.
Okay, I got it.
Is C.
Mr. President, may I also note the minutes from the June 3rd administrative function swearing? Those were circulated, and there was some edits made.
Are they ready to be considered?
Yeah.
Yes.
I move we accept the June 2nd as amended.
June 3rd.
June 3rd.
June 3rd.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No one opposed? Okay. No public comments. So now we're going to have...
Mr. President, I'd like to introduce
Oh, yes.
a new staff person for
Yes.
the record. Hi, this is Kara Bumbre. I think I got it right. Kara is serving as the budget analyst for our department now.
Welcome.
So,
Good.
Management budget specialist.
management budget specialist. So she's
Kira.
Kira. Kera. Okay. Thank you.
so she lives in Gaithersburg, which is good, especially considering a lot of the last minute budget stuff that occurs. So
Welcome.
she'll be able to come here, and it won't be that far of a drive. So welcome aboard.
Yes. Okay, we're going to have the board member orientation
Yes.
shown on our new high-tech equipment. Wait till you see this.
I'm going to see which decade you consider this to be.
No.
Enough question.
Oh,
Yeah, right.
okay. That's pretty good.
Yeah, nice.
Well, if we get bored, we can turn on Netflix.
Exactly. Oh, that's nice. It's the food channel. Good.
Cooking channel?
Yeah, food channel. There it is. Do we hit the lights or no?
No, we can see.
We can see this.
Okay.
Okay, so first of all, we would like for the board to hold your questions till the end of the presentation. So that's our first request. Mission statement, you can read it on your own, but for our purposes, the mission of the Board of Elections is to register voters, conduct elections, assist persons seeking elective office with candidate filings, campaign funds, assisting citizens seeking to place questions on ballot and preserve election data. Elections are a continuous cycle of tasks and responsibilities. When our staff walks through the door of this office, each individual is a nonpartisan. Our focus is service to the voter and performance of our related duties, that we will conduct ourselves in a fair and impartial manner so that the elections are always honest and fair. Okay, no, go back. That's Kevin.
Okay. I was asked to give a very quick overview on the three sort of legal requirements, and they start at the federal level. We have state requirements, and then obviously we have certain requirements we need to meet at the county level. The Voting Rights Act, Section 203, is of importance to us. It's been in place now, Margaret, for what, 16 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Section 203 requires that if you have 5% of your voting age population that has a higher rate of illiteracy and has difficulty with the English language, the federal government requires, after a census, that there be compliance with Section 203. Montgomery County is one of the jurisdictions throughout the country that has a Section 203 requirement for Spanish. And Section 203 really has three real components. So one is outreach, which will be talked about in greater detail by the staff in terms of what's done for outreach, not only to the Spanish community, but also to other, well, quite frankly, to all of our voters in Montgomery County. The second requirement is to have bilingual personnel, and we have bilingual personnel that are on staff. And as you'll hear through the outreach program, there's an emphasis on getting Spanish-speaking judges as well as judges that speak other languages to be able to then service our voters. And the third is to be able to go ahead and provide all of election material in English and Spanish. So when you hear Margaret and the staff talk about we have the English version, we're working on the Spanish version, is because everything in this office that is election-related material must be in both languages. So Dr. Z presumably will talk about voter outreach and what's done in the community. So that covers Section 203. The second is the UOCAVA, Uniform and Overseas Citizens Absentee Act. This is of importance, particularly as it relates to when we do the absentee canvass. UOCAVA, which you'll hear the acronym used all the time, basically allows members of the United States military, their families, and citizens who reside outside the United States that they are able to get an absentee ballot. UOCAVA was amended by the Military Overseas Voter Empowerment Act, commonly called the MOVE Act, where it was amended to give, it affected UOCAVA in two respects. One is that materials could be requested, registration and absentee ballots could be requested electronically. Of really critical importance to the day-to-day operations of the board, though, the MOVE Act required that if a request was on file for an absentee ballot from a UOCAVA voter, that ballot had to be sent out at least 45 days before the election, federal election. So that has really compressed the preparation schedule in terms of ballots that the staff has to work under. The next is the National Voter Registration Act, commonly referred to as the NVRA, or the Motor Voter Act. Section 5 of that act requires that states allow individuals to register at MVA, which I'm sure most of us are familiar with. Section 6 requires a mail-in application procedure to be established by each state. Section 7 requires states to offer voter registration applications at various state and local facilities and offices. And Section 8 requires the state to implement procedures to maintain active and current voter registration list. And Jessica will spend some time talking about the list maintenance procedures that the board follows and the various programs, ERIC among others, that are used to do list maintenance processes. The last is the Americans with Disabilities Act. In my experience, there really are two components to that which are of significance in the election world. The first relates to making sure the voting equipment is accessible to individuals who have disabilities. The state has had for years an ongoing battle with the Federation for the Blind with regard to accessibility for voting equipment, which has now been resolved, but it was ongoing litigation. That really is not our issue because the state dictates the equipment that's utilized. But certainly there is a requirement for the 230 plus polling places that are utilized on election day to make sure that they are all ADA accessible. And I think you'll find when you go out on election day, one of the big things is to make sure that the ADA door is operational to make sure we're in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. I skipped over the Help America Vote Act, HAVA. That obviously followed in the wake of Bush versus Gore, and it involved the selection of voting systems by states. But from our perspective, the most important element is that as you'll be spending days on end looking at provisional ballots, that everyone has the opportunity to at least fill out a provisional ballot application so that no one is turned away at the polls. So that's kind of the backdrop at the federal level. The state level, obviously the Constitution of Maryland is important for determining eligibility for voters and what are the minimum eligibility requirements set forth in Article 1. In addition, the Constitution sets forth the requirements for charter amendments and referenda. Montgomery County has a very active group of citizens that file petitions. It's not unusual for us to get more than one charter amendment or petition every election cycle, and the Constitution requires that you have 10,000 validated signatures in order to have a question for a charter amendment put on the ballot. We could spend days talking about the election law article, which I'm not going to bore you on. My general observation as you go through this process is that the election law article is set up that the procedures have to be uniform throughout the entire state. The challenge that Montgomery County faces is that the same procedures that would be used in Garrett County in terms of implementation of voting equipment, the use of the statewide voter registration system, those are the same processes that apply in Garrett County. So Montgomery County and Garrett County are using the same policies and procedures articulated by the state board and the state board administrator, and I think there are some challenges as it relates to that. With regard to at the county level, Margaret, I know I went over my 2 minutes here, but at the county level,
it's not like we pay you by the hour.
You have the county charter, and really the personnel regs and performance measures. Really, there are three things here. The charter and the code set forth requirements for petitions that are filed with respect to challenges to county laws that require 5% of the total registered voters in Montgomery County to sign that petition, which is somewhere between 30 to 35,000 validated signatures. So it's important in that regard. The second issue is that Montgomery County, unlike a variety of other jurisdictions in the state, the employees here at the Board of Elections are merit employees. They are part of the merit system, the full-time staff. And so a lot of the personnel matters are addressed through the county's personnel regulations. And then the final thing is county funding, which is state law requires that this county has an obligation to provide reasonable levels of funding for the Montgomery County Board of Elections. Of course, what is reasonable funding is subject to some interpretation. And so I think the new board members will find that a lot of time is spent going over the budget and reviewing where things are in terms of how items are budgeted and how you all can impress upon the elected officials why more funding is appropriate for the Board of Elections. So it's a very quick overview, but does anyone have any questions?
Lots of them, but I think that Margaret would jump on us if we did it.
Oh, sorry.
She's had to wait for the
Okay.
answer.
Well, I know some people have dinner plans.
Okay.
Allison?
What you have on the screen here is our organization chart. It strips down to the 31 permanent year-round positions that we have in this office. If we included all of our temporary employees, you'd see another 80 to 100 boxes up on that screen because we do activate a lot of temporary support during the peak season for an election. All told, we have funding for about 56 full-time equivalents in our personnel budget. At the top, you see in the two management leadership service positions for the county, you see our director, Margaret Jurgensen, obviously. Over to the right, you see me. I'm the deputy election director, Allison McLaughlin. And then we have 3 division chiefs who report straight to our election director. They are Janet Ross, who heads up our information technology division. You'll be hearing more from her later. Janet, wave. We have Chris Zizit, who heads up our operations division. Chris is not here today. Eric Olson from her team is going to be giving the presentation. Eric, wave. Jessica Newby is the chief of our voter services division, which includes voter registration and absentee voting. There's Jessica. In yellow, you see our core administrative team. You have Lisa Marino, who is the secretary to the board, who handles human resources for the office. And then you have Kira Bumbre, who was introduced earlier, our new budget and finance person. In the pink, you have what I've begun referring to as our civic engagement team. You've got there our public information program, outreach, our election judge recruitment and training, and I'll be giving their parts of the presentation today. Next slide. We do this, of course, not only running an election is, of course, an activity that goes well beyond the resources of 31 people or however many, 80 to 100 additional temporary employees that we hire on, or even the 3,000 or so election judges that we'll have out there in the field on election day. It's really an all-of-county government activity, a team effort. We, of course, some of the departments that you see up there, we rely obviously on community use of public facilities, the public schools, the rec department, the public libraries for the bulk of our election day polling places. But really every other department of county government in some way, shape, or form helps support an election, whether it's the Office of Technology Services that supports our equipments, and they've done things like develop an election judge management tool for us that we use. Our Department of Permitting Services provides labor for us on election night. Our Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security provides our election day communications tool. We have really various different ways that all of the rest of the county supports the conduct of an election.
So our goals for 2020, very basic ones, are results posted online by 11 p.m., our election day wait times of 30 minutes or less, and to continue our high voter satisfaction level, which is at 92%. We are looking and working to try to fine-tune some of our training so that while we are receiving, our last election we did have 99% of the results in by 11 o'clock. We're trying to improve the election judge performance of packing up their supplies and to try to get back here by 1 a.m. as opposed to 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning.
Can I ask a question? The election day wait times of 30 minutes or less, that's the goal for all voters?
That's the goal for election day.
Right, for all voters.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then pre-election cycle. So after each major election, each section reviews all elements of the previous election. Reports are prepared and the board is briefed monthly. The staff performs within their section lessons learned, and each section leader then contributes to the planning session for the upcoming election cycle. The staff will participate also with other counties and the state board staff in these lessons learned, and then another element is that the state board will audit the work of the counties later in the process. In terms of will audit the work of the canvas also. The staff's planning covers projections of expected turnout, ballot needs, supplies, equipment needs, and expected allocation. Budget expenditures are mainly for personnel, election judges, and other professional services, and state billing make up approximately 89%, with another 7% dedicated to mandated mailings, which would include the sample ballot and the voter registration notification card, as well as confirmation mailings that we're required to send. So that gives you kind of an idea of what the overall budget, without getting into the details of the actual numbers. Next. Election cycle overview.
Hello. So what you're going to see throughout this presentation is this wheel. It's the election cycle overview that's going to cycle through. So as we do each section, you'll kind of see where we are in the cycle, just for the ordering of how the presentation will go.
Sorry. This is where I thought you were going.
No, that's fine. So I'm starting
with... You did rehearse this, believe it or not.
Voter registration. Of course, the main tasks of voter registration is to register and update voter records. As of June 1st, we had 718,000 registered voters. About 90% of the new registrations take place either at the MBA or through the online voter registration portal that the state provides. In addition, we process petitions, as Kevin touched on earlier. There's many petitions that get filed. They're both local and statewide petitions. Local petitions tend to be referendums, charter amendments in nature, or could be local candidates filing by petition. Statewide levels, also candidates who are filing for statewide office, or for new party, as we had in 2018 for the Bread and Roses Party. We also conduct registrar training. That's for members of the public who want to come in and learn how to register voters to go back out in the community and provide that service. The voter registration staff processes provisional ballots, which we also touched on. Provisional ballots are issued to a voter when the voter's eligibility cannot be determined on the spot and additional research is needed. So this would be the case where the poll book the judge can't find the voter in the poll book, or the poll book indicates that the voter's already been sent an absentee ballot, anything that requires additional information or research. So that research is done back here at the office. The voter registration staff researches and updates the voter records for all provisionals from early voting and election day. And then they do a recommended disposition of the ballot, and then those ballots are held, and you guys have the opportunity to review them and make the final disposition of the ballot during the canvass process. And then the last is list maintenance, which is the process of keeping the voter rolls accurate and voter information current. And we will do an in-depth dive into that at the end of this, the cycle we'll go through.
Say that again. You'll do an in-depth
into the list maintenance piece. I'll actually, there's a separate.
At the end of
At the end of the
Thank you.
The cycle presentation will go into the list maintenance piece in detail. And then these are just the other registration and verification options. As I alluded to, online and MVA are the most popular, but voters may also register in person or with one of the volunteer registrars, by mail, or using the same-day registration. All first-time voters must go through a verification process or show ID. And the verification process requires that the voter either provide their Maryland driver's license or ID number, or the last four of their social security number. If they're unable to provide either of those pieces, or they still aren't able to be verified, then they do show ID the first time they vote.
All right, I'm going to talk to you guys about candidate filing, our next piece of the pie here. So the candidate process for the 2020 elections has already begun. The candidate filing period is open already. When candidates begin that process, they start by registering their campaign entity with the state board. So they go to the state to complete that first, and then they come to our office after that is complete to complete the filing process with us. That includes things like giving us their financial disclosure statement, making sure their information is correct and accurate. They go through the process and then they get their certificate of candidacy. Now in Montgomery County, candidates can opt to receive public funding for certain positions. None of those positions are eligible for the 2020 election cycle, but they will be in the gubernatorial years, so for 2022. And the state board is the one that tracks campaign financing and public funds, so when people have requests, that information is available online. That's available for the public to go and find out. These are our offices that are going to appear on the 2020 ballot. Just a couple notes on this. We have a lot fewer local offices in a presidential year than we do during a gubernatorial year. So we have a lot fewer offices, a lot fewer candidates coming in. I'll also note that the Board of Education positions at the bottom, there's District 2 and District 4 on the ballot next year. Just a point of clarification for you all county residents vote for both of those districts. That's just a requirement of the Board of Education member that they live in District 2 or District 4, but all county residents vote on all of those Board of Education positions. All right, moving on next to polling place selection. For early voting, we have already begun doing some site assessments for our early voting sites, doing site surveys, looking at tech infrastructure at those locations, looking at things like accessibility, are they large enough, do they have enough parking, things like that. So at your next board meeting in July, we're going to be presenting you with site options for those early voting locations. As our deadline for that is pretty early, and on October 28th, we have to submit the proposed sites to the state board, and then on November 28th, the state will make a decision on the final decision on the designation of those early voting sites based on your recommendation as a board. For Election Day itself, then, we are going to be looking at what sites were not available to us in 2018 that we might go back to in 2020, and conversely, what sites are not available in 2020. Oftentimes there are construction and things like that going on that don't make certain sites available. I have more than 230 sites. There's always a few that have some kind of issue where they are not available for use. So we will assess and survey potential new or replacement locations, and then we will obtain board approval for any new locations by January of next year. In the meantime, we'll be working on getting leases prepared and getting insurance set up for all those private facilities. We'll coordinate with public safety at all those locations. We'll also work with county officials and school personnel and the private facilities to prepare for Election Day. That includes things like setting up a delivery schedule of the equipment, getting ready supply delivery, doing testing phone lines, anything like that. We also have to make sure that we have planned for any accommodations needed under the ADA. Maybe there's a ramp that we have to put in, a temporary ramp at a facility. We need to order that in advance, things like that to make sure all our sites are accessible. And then for any of those sites that do change, we have a legal mandate to send voter notification cards to any of those polling places that have changed. So any voter that's in a precinct where their polling place wasn't what it was the last time, we send them out cards that they know that they're going to a different location for the next election.
Outreach. I'll speak to you about our outreach program and then our election judge recruitment and training programs. We have a robust outreach program. It's won numerous awards, and it has a history of really strong volunteer engagement in the community. Our core purposes obviously are to register voters, to educate voters about their voting choices, whether that's voting by mail, voting early, voting on Election Day, all of which, of course, any voter may do. Demonstrating the voting equipment, and, of course, recruiting election workers. We approach our outreach mission through the lens of empowerment, equipping voters to exercise their right to vote. We have a very diverse community, obviously, and pay particular attention to the needs of minority language communities. As Kevin cited our requirements under Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act. In addition to Spanish, we provide materials in Braille. We provide translators in targeted polling places who speak a number of other languages. In addition to the Spanish, which of course we provide election workers in every polling place across the county, we target and pay close attention to our largest minority language groups other than Spanish are Chinese, Korean, French, Vietnamese, and Amharic. And then we have a number of other, we track the languages spoken by our election judges as well. Moving on to the next slide. The Future Vote program is really a flagship of our outreach effort. We won our most recent national award for this program, a Clary Award from the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, which we just received last year. We were one of a handful of jurisdictions across the country recognized for best practices for innovation and efficiency. This program was developed beginning in 2004. We recruited more than 44,000 middle school and high school students to serve at the polls through that program. Together, they've earned more than 93,000 student service learning hours. The program serves as a pipeline to service as an election judge, and many of our Future Vote students do graduate into being very well prepared and confident adult poll workers. You'll hear hand-wringing nationally about the challenges of recruiting young people to serve as election judges, as poll workers, and here in Montgomery County we have much less of a problem than a lot of our peers across the country with that because we have such a strong pipeline of bringing youth into the program. Recruiting. Our election worker program is responsible for recruiting election judges, training them, assigning them to their duties at the polls on election day, of course paying them, which is very important, and evaluating their performance, both in training and at the polls on election day. They recruit year-round, maintaining a database of returning workers that they supplement through outreach with new applicants. And of course, they work with applicants through the process of scheduling and completing their training. We receive a lot of questions about whether there are positions at the polls that allow you to work part-time, only part of the day. The answer is yes. We absolutely do have opportunities for people to serve only part of the day. It is a very long day, of course, out there working, whether you're working early voting or on election day. On the left of that slide, you see a list of the full-day positions we have, which run from 6 a.m. until the polls are closed up and everything is out about 11 o'clock at night. Our chief judges, who serve a bipartisan team that is responsible for running every election day site. Most of our workers out there at the polls are what we refer to as voting operations judges. Some of our voting operations judges have additional responsibilities that may be serving provisional voters, maybe driving materials back here to our site or to our regional sites on election day. We also have standby judges who will stay by the phone waiting for us to call them and send them off to a site where we may need some extra support that day. And we have roamers who are generally our experienced chief judges who graduate to serving a group of a small number of voting sites on election day. On the right, you see our list of our part-day positions. We divide that voting operations judge into two slots, our VOP-A, our VOP-B. In those VOP-A positions, we send out extra greeters, extra support to sites that we know have a history of having a high volume of turnout in the morning. And then our VOP-B position is where we also provide that opportunity for election judges to serve who are available in that afternoon shift. We also have evening positions only for people who say need to go to their day job over the course of the day and then report to a polling place after work to help close up and bring materials back here to our office, where we also have election night support physically located here and physically located off at our regional sites in the evening. VOP again is for our voting operations judges. Our training is required for all election judges every election. Here in Montgomery County, we have a two-part curriculum. First, to be an election judge, you need to read parts of the election judge manual that are available online, and you have to pass an online quiz. Once you pass that quiz, you're able to sign up to take your hands-on training which is offered primarily here at our office, but also at several other locations around the county. And then after the hands-on training, you can return for walk-in refresher training to brush up on your skills before Election Day. We pride ourselves on having small class sizes with a low trainer-to-student ratio that allows us to evaluate each student's skills in the classroom for proper placement. And then we also solicit peer feedback and evaluate the materials that we receive back from polling places to ensure that we do address any performance issues that we have at the polls on Election Day and provide remedial training if we need it. Make sure that we've got strong teams out there at the polls on Election Day. This is also a program that we have in the past won national awards for our precinct performance evaluation process.
Ballot proofing. So for ballot proofing, the state board staff will send to all the various counties various reports that we are to review and confirm that the jurisdictional makeup of every precinct represents all of the offices that are running in that precinct. This is a and then of course also the proofing of the names. Once the deadline has passed for filing for office, the state begins the ballot layout process, starting with the paper ballot or the paper optical scan ballot. Montgomery County has approximately 10 or 12 days to proof the ballots. This means that we have to proof all ballot styles. So we are proofing a paper optical scan ballot in English and Spanish, a fax web delivery paper ballot in English and Spanish, a ballot marking device ballot in English and Spanish, and the audio ballots. Our highest priority is to complete the paper optical scan ballot because we need to notify all the candidates or petition circulators that the ballot is proofed, and we have it posted on our and they can come and see it in our office, or it's on our website so that they can look at it 24/7. After the team completes the paper optical scan, then I will provide the electronic copies of the paper ballot after the state has signed off on the proofing to Eric and Allison to begin the process to prepare the sample ballot. We tried to target early delivery of the sample ballot so that every voter would receive it approximately 7 days prior to the voter registration deadline.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the equipment prep. First is the IT timeline of all the tasks that we are currently taking to prepare for the election. You'll see that in third quarter, fourth quarter, we're expecting to get the new equipment, and we'll have to do some acceptance testing. And then there's also some software upgrades we know for sure for the scanners, possibly for the BMDs. In January through April is when we really start diving into preparing the equipment. And we also test the regional collection network, the RCN sites, from January through April. From January through March, we are required by SBE to test the network once a month. In April, we are required to test it every week. And then we also have to test it the day before the election to make sure the network is still working. And for those of you who don't know, the regional collection network is where the judges bring their memory sticks, the unofficial results, and we transmit those results into the server room downstairs. So those are the unofficial results we get by 11 o'clock. Okay, in the next slide, we will go into the equipment for the voting system. The electionware is where we load the election database. Memory stick is the media we create for the BMDs and the DS200. The DS200 is the scanner that we send out to every election site. The BMD is our ADA for voters that have issues, or anybody actually can use it to vote on that. And then the DS850 is our high-speed scanner and we only use that for canvas. And then the equipment preparation is broken down into 3 steps. Logic and accuracy prep. And for those of you who don't know, logic and accuracy is just testing the equipment to make sure it performs as expected. Okay, and during this step, we allocate the equipment using Margaret's allocation, and we assign it to the different precincts. We key in we scan in the serial numbers, the security codes from all the security seals, and we create a database. Then once the ballot is approved, we load the election into the electionware. We start creating the memory sticks. For the last election, just to give you an idea of how many sticks we had to create, it was 1,300 sticks or more. So for this election, we know we're going to be doing more because we have more equipment. So, and then the logic and accuracy is the last step, and that's where we run a stack of ballots through the scanners, and it has to meet a prescribed test that the state has developed. If it doesn't, when we send the file to the state, they'll tell us this machine wasn't LNA'd correctly. We got to do it again. Okay, and the poll books follows the same steps. It's just different equipment. The only thing with the poll books, we have an additional step, which is the bulk update. We get a file from early voting of everybody that voted during early voting, and we have to load that file to all the election day poll books. We're given that Friday before the election, that Friday and Saturday, to do this whole process. In addition to that, we have to pack the poll book printers and put everything in route order so that it can all be delivered on Monday morning.
Polling place, supply and ballot packing. So, as you can see, first of all, what you visually are seeing is part of the nearly 1.7 million ballots that we received for the last election. We prepare a ballot order and do an allocation in preparation for how many ballots we'll need for early voting or the precinct. The ballots then are, when they are delivered, are verified several times. Once when we receive them from the printer, and then again when we are packing for precinct or early voting distribution, whether it's in the blue bin for election day or the black carts for early voting. And then when the ballots are packaged and then placed into the black cart, the supply warehouse supervisor will then go to every black cart and confirm that the correct ballot has been packaged for that specific precinct. This is a job that requires a tremendous amount of precision and attention to detail, because there can be no errors, because you cannot send the wrong ballot to a precinct. Excuse me. All ballots and supplies are verified at least 4 times. Once initially by the staff person that's actually doing it. Then again, the supply warehouse lead, which is 100%. So what you're seeing then, this picture, can you go back, is some of the supplies that are going to go into one of 4 bags that we will package for election judges for election day. Then once the bags are packed, then the operations manager, because first of all, the supply warehouse manager has verified each package that's going to go into these various bags. And then the operations manager comes back and she will do a 25% verification. And then I will come through and do a 10% verification. Then once all of the bags are packed with all of the various different types of supplies, you all will come here and review what's been packaged into these bags as part of your duties for supply bag verification. Then this needs to be done Thursday before the election. Friday we begin the chief judge briefing. Sometimes bags will be picked up at that time, but the majority of these bags, they're red bag, green bag, blue bag, orange bag, will be picked up on Saturday as well with all of the election supplies that are necessary.
Absentee voting. Absentee voting in Maryland is no excuse, which means that any voter can request to vote by this method. They don't need to have a reason to request a ballot. Voters can request ballots to be sent to them by mail. They can request a ballot to be web delivered, which means that they would retrieve it from the state board's website. And of course, they can receive a ballot in person if they would like. Absentee ballot applications are processed by our staff to prepare the ballots to go out. Same process with the UOCAVA voters. They use a slightly different application, and as Kevin mentioned earlier, they must be sent out 45 days prior to the election. Regardless the method that the ballot is issued to the voter, whether it's web delivery, mail, so of course the voter must return the ballot either by mail or in person. So there is no electronic return of ballots, even though the voter can retrieve the ballot electronically initially. Ballots must be delivered back to our office by election day, or they must be postmarked by the post office by election day. We also administer a nursing home and assisted living program through the absentee voting section. This program goes out to nursing homes and assisted living facilities. They're bipartisan teams of judges, and they assist the voters at those locations in completing their ballots. As I mentioned, we have in-person voting, and we also have the ability for a voter to request a ballot via an agent. This would be if somebody was in the hospital or unable to otherwise get a ballot for themselves. So this would be another method. The ballots are primarily mailed out by contractors managed by the State Board of Elections. Web delivery is managed in the same method until the week before the election. At that point, the local board takes over the mailing process of sending the ballots out in order to make sure they're timely delivered. The same with emailing ballots to voters who may need reissued ballots. We mail and reissue throughout the cycle for those that may have been spoiled, lost in the mail, or for voters who need special needs ballots like a large print. And then we receive and stage the ballots for canvass. This is a little bit of a graphic of how that process takes place. The ballots come in and are separated by either web or mail delivery, the method for which they received it in the first place. And when we get to the canvass process, there's differences in how they must be handled. We separate them then by congressional districts. We batch them into groups of 50, receive the ballot by barcode scan into the registration system so that the voters can go online and see that their ballot has been received by our office. Then we run some reports. We have a lot of back-end methodology to make sure the accounting of the ballots. We want to know where every ballot is at every step of the way. So this is part of the process, and we'll go into a little deeper when we get to canvass step.
All right, so the early voting process, in 2020 we have the dates listed here. Early voting takes place over 8 days. It ends the Thursday prior to Election Day, and for the primary election it runs from 10 a.m. until 8 p.m. And then during the general election, that time goes a little earlier from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. each day. We have 11 early voting centers, possibly a 12th in 2020. We do provide the public with wait times at each early voting center, since they have the option to go to any early voting center they choose. The times we have the waits, usually it's on the first and the last day, and the last few hours of the day are when we've had some waits. The center managers and the chief judges run the early voting center, and that's supported by an early voting help desk that answers questions when the election judges have issues and problems, and a system of runners which supplies ballots and other supplies out to those sites as well. And for each day of early voting, we do a daily intake of our critical documents that come in, provide those to voter services so they can process those, and we make sure that all the sites are resupplied for the start of the next day. We've got a map here that shows our early voting centers from 2018, and the site locations is something you guys will be discussing. I will point out that St. Catherine's was a substitute site in 2018 for the Wheaton Recreational Center, which is now, they've completed construction on and is back open again.
It's not open quite yet. Don't believe it.
We'll be open. We'll be open by the time we have to use it for if we use it for open.
Okay, Election Day. Election Day, really for us, begins the night before. Our election judges have all their expected report to their polling place. They're to set up their polling place. They are to verify that they've received the correct ballots and the correct poll books so that they will be able to function. So what they do is they set up their polling place and have a meeting with all of their election judges, going over the specific things that we've advised them to do. And our goal is to have them come in somewhere between 5:30 and 6:30, get their polling place set up, get all their equipment set up, test the poll books, and ideally be done between 9 and 9:30. It doesn't exactly always work that way, but we're generally the last election. I think we were able to leave at 11 p.m. on the day before, which was pretty good for us. And then of course we return the next day. The staff will be here, depending on who you are, somewhere between 4:30 and 5 a.m. And for those lucky souls, they get to come in at 7. 6. But it will be an early day for you also. We expect and plan to have you should plan to have your cell phone 100% charged and be prepared to start going out to polling places no later than 6:15. Lisa and I put together routes for you, but more than likely, if what your role will be is to serve as, number one, a troubleshooter. So in that instance, you'll get a phone call from Kevin, you'll get a phone call from Allison, or you may get a phone call from me, in which I will call you and say, we're having a specific problem at Claire Barton, you need to get there, and you go over there and find out what's going on. Other things that the board members will do is meet with the media, because we want the chief judges to focus on servicing our voters to make sure that the process is working for them. Also, because of our nearness to D.C., our State Department sends different visitors out, and we will ask you to go meet those visitors. I also have, because we get a lot of requests, we also contact past board members to help us in that role of educating people with regards to Election Day and what the activities are. So the biggest thing that we need from you is to serve as a troubleshooter. And you will be out most of the day. You will be standing a lot, so wear comfortable shoes. The SBE requires that we have a meeting scheduled to deal with any emergencies. So we generally try to set that up around lunchtime to serve you a lunch. And then the meeting, plan to, like I said, you'll work all day. I do need someone here to, or at least a partisan team, to kick off the early voting tabulation, sign off on that, and then you'll go back out, and it'll be a very long day. Plan to rest on Wednesday, because then you're going to be spending the next 12 days here as a member of the Canvass Board. Polling place on Election Day. We have a contract with the League of Women Voters who do polling place support program. They are making sure that all of the things that we train the election judges to do are actually doing it. An example of one of the times that the League of Women Voter Services through the polling place program was wonderful was we discovered with the institution of Section 203, I had some chief judges tearing off the Spanish language part and only posting English, And so we were able to identify that right away to prevent it from happening in the next, the general election. So they serve a really wonderful role. We have a help desk that's going on in what we call the flex room, and they're receiving calls and monitor everything that's happening in the polling place. We also have a voter service line that's answering voter questions, or maybe a chief judge will call in and try to unravel, a mystery voter that says they registered to vote and try to fix that. Also, we have regional collection sites and at 6 locations. And then the other thing that will be going on is the election night returns. All of the election judges are expected to return all of the bags, all the voted ballots, and all the provisional bags that have voted ballots in it. They will, and the electronic poll books, or what we call the EPB. The black cart will stay at the site. It is supposed to be returned to where it was, they pulled it out of. That is 90% successful. But generally speaking, if we do have the black card out, the principal or the lady in the office will call and say, there's this big black card, what to do, and Chris manages that and gets that completed. That's pretty much. Election day is a long day. I can tell you that.
And as Margaret alluded to, when election day is over, rest up, because next we're going to canvass. And we're going to go into what that means to you first. So board members are sworn in as Board of Canvass members at a board meeting prior to election day. The first absentee canvass convenes the first Thursday following election day at 10 a.m. The provisional canvass convenes on the second Wednesday following election day at 10 a.m. And absentee 2 convenes on the second Friday following election day at 10 a.m. However, we need you here because we will reconvene after each consecutive day until all of the ballots for this subsequent canvass have been processed. So this is the process of just going through, checking these absentees and provisionals. We do use bipartisan teams to canvass the ballots. They are distributed to them in batches, as I was kind of illustrating for you earlier with the process of preparing for canvass. The teams review the envelopes, determine if they're timely, if they're signed. If the ballots are timely and they're signed, they're opened, the ballots removed, the envelopes set aside. The ballots then reviewed for compliance and if the ability of the ballot to be read by the ballot scanner. Ballots that cannot be read by the scanner and the web delivery ballots have to be duplicated by these bipartisan teams. Any questionable ballot, if it's not timely received, there's no signature, multiple ballots in the envelope, or if there's a question of voter intent, that would be referred to the Board of Canvassers, which will be you, to rule on whether to accept or reject the ballot. Timely ballots that are in compliance are then transferred to the ballot room to be tabulated. These ballots are sent over in batches, and the batch counts from the canvass teams are matched to the scanner counts after the ballots are scanned through to ensure that every ballot is counted. Because again, we want to keep that chain of custody all the way through.
After an election, but before you certify the results, we check our work. We check our work, we check the work of our election judges, we check the integrity of the process, we check the accuracy of the results. The first step is that we do what we call our 100% verification of the election night results. As I'm sure you all know, out of the polls, there's a tape that is printed from the voting scanners and it is put on a wall or a window. We get copies of those tapes back at our office with the election night results. And the first thing that we do is we go through and we make sure that all of the equipment was properly shut down and all of those results were posted on our website on election night. We go through and we make sure that all of the ballots were counted on election night for the election day results. The next step is that we go through and we make sure that all of the voters who checked in correspond to those results so that we are able to account for every voter that checked in, every ballot that was cast, and if those numbers are not the same, then we know why. In many cases, the reasons those numbers are not the same correspond to a provisional ballot that you are sitting in the provisional canvass at that time reviewing. And so it's important for us to go through and to examine all of the chief judge logs. We do read them. We read every word of them. All of the rumor reports, the voter complaints, any information that's in the help desk tickets that we received back at our help desk, any information that was reported by you on election day, so that we were able to gather all of the evidence that you need to be able to evaluate any of the questions that arise about individuals' provisional ballots. So we're focusing on finding any reasons for any discrepancies, any concerns that are related to those absentee and provisional ballots before you can finish your absentee and provisional canvass. We want to make sure that we present you with complete information on whether to count or to reject an absentee or a provisional ballot. In addition, we are going through and we are making sure that all of our processes were followed correctly. We are going through a random selection of our absentee and provisional ballots, and we are making sure that the processes were all followed correctly, and that ballots were accurately recommended to you for acceptance or for rejection. We are also checking to make sure that the voting system counted ballots correctly. And the way that we do that is under a contract statewide. We have an independent third-party software that takes the images of the ballots that were counted by our vendor's software, and we have that third-party vendor examines the images of the ballots, independently tabulates them to see if they arrive at the same result. They probably won't, because there will be situations where their software will read just as you do when you're going through the absentee and the provisional canvass. You may have a question of voter intent. You may have a situation where the oval is or is not exactly in the oval, and you need to make a judgment call. And so the software too will look at that slightly differently. And so what we do when we present the findings of our audit to you, we present the findings on any discrepancies that the two different pieces of software found as they scan the ballot images. And as long as that there's a margin in between the two that is well within the tolerance, then you will act based on that information to go ahead and certify the outcome of the election. Again, we do investigate everything that we've got in-house. It is a race against the clock to make sure that we are able to get all of the information to you that you need before closing out the provisional canvass and the absentee canvass, to make sure that we are satisfied in the accuracy of the result before we recommend to you that you go ahead and certify the outcome of the election. Answer any questions that you have. You will vote to certify the outcome of the election, and then we will begin again with the next election. Jessica is going to talk to you about the maintenance processes that we're following year round.
All right, so list maintenance. Now, the topic we're going to be talking about mainly is what we're doing with voter cancellations, confirmations process. So when I speak of address changes, I'm talking about address changes of voters who've moved out of state, or that we've received notification of out-of-state moves. Any voter that moves within the state of Maryland, we do the updates, and they just get moved to the respective county and they remain registered. So this does not apply to in-state moves, this is out-of-state moves. List maintenance compliance, as we've covered, is federal and state law and local regulation is what outlines the process of how we conduct our list maintenance processes. There are two paths of cancellations. One is cancellation without confirmation. This process applies to address changes that are either the voter request or a notice that's of registration from another state. You may have noticed at the bottom of the voter registration application, there's a place to indicate the previous place of registration. We mail those among all 50 states, District of Columbia, with each other to update records. So that is an allowed source for cancellation. If a voter is deceased and we receive notice from the Maryland Department of Health and Mental Hygiene or the Social Security Administration's list, that's a source of cancellation. Felons from the clerk of the district and circuit court, we get notification from those, and non-citizens from the jury commission. Now you'll notice on the Social Security Administration, district courts, and jury commission lines, we do send a notification to those voters that we received information that they're no longer eligible, and they have 2 weeks to provide a cause why they should not be removed. So it's not the same as the next step we'll go into for confirmation, but they do have 2 weeks to provide a reason. And this is an example of a voter request for cancellation. It's asking to be removed from the rolls. The other method is confirmation prior to cancellation. So this process applies to address changes that we find out from the national change of address, return mail such as the sample ballots or polling place notification changes, information we receive as part of the Electronic Registration Information Center, ERIC, jury commission, again, address changes, and then deceased notifications from the jury commission or from other sources. This is what some of the return mail looks like. In the right corner is a sample ballot we've received back, and the left is a polling place change or a voter notification. These are the type of labels that we process. The Electronic Registration Information Center, ERIC, is a program that Maryland joined in 2013. Maryland was one of the founding states of this joint project. As of now, there's 26 states plus the District of Columbia that share information every month. This is a comparison list that is processed every other month, so information from the local jurisdictions via the state are transmitted up to this ERIC. They process all of this information to compile the list. This has improved the efficiency of our list maintenance process, and with the addition of the Social Security Administration records and the national change of address in March of 17, it really, especially with the Social Security Administration, it's opened another source of reportable deaths. These are only reportable deaths, so these are not natural occurring or attended to deaths, but it's still another source to help clean up. Just a little illustration, all the data kind of comes together from the 26 states in DC. If a voter appears on more than one data source, then the state of the least recent activity, if you put it that way. So if the voter voted in Virginia in 18, the last activity we had was in 16, we would receive a notification that it's believed that the voter is now in Virginia. These voters do go through the confirmation process. So a confirmation notice is sent to the new address. The voter is made inactive after 2 weeks if there's no response. They remain inactive for 2 federal general elections. Inactive voters are canceled if they fail to vote in the 2 subsequent federal elections. A federal general election is a presidential and a gubernatorial, both count. The confirmation process is suspended for 90 days prior to every federal election, so no voter can be made inactive during this time. If a voter is inactive, however, they retain all the same rights as an active voter. They still appear in the poll book, and they vote a standard ballot at the polls upon written confirmation of their current address. And if you see circled in red is the affirmation of residency for the inactive voter. If there's a voter update needed because there is a correction, so this is not an address change of the voter moved, but let's say the voter didn't include their apartment number or there was some other error with the address. They can use this update form to correct that issue. If the voter has an address change, they can use same-day registration during early voting, or on election day they will complete a provisional ballot, which will then update the address. This is just like a little timeline. So in the last election, we mailed out our sample ballots in October. Because of that 90-day lockdown, we could not make any voters inactive, so we did not process those until after the election. We worked through all the sample ballots. We sent a confirmation postcard. The voter was made inactive. The voter, if they failed to vote in the 2 subsequent federal elections, then that voter timeline would be, they would be canceled in December of 2022. In order to be reactivated, if a voter is made inactive, all they have to do is vote in any county or statewide election, update their voter record, or sign a petition, or submit an application for an absentee ballot. And some of the challenges, some of the obstacles we have to list maintenance are deaths that occur outside of Maryland. It's got better with Social Security, but it's still not comprehensive. College students, we know college students move away, they come back, we're not the first place they update their information with. The transient population, any major metropolitan areas going to have a lot of population that shifts and moves across, especially with us bordering Virginia and DC. And then, of course, we have large volumes of changes. The last NCOA list we processed had over 15,000 voters on it, and we do it every other month. The current status is we have 57,395 inactive voters. We have nearly 10,000 16 and 17-year-old voters who in Maryland are considered active registrants. They're just not eligible yet. We have over 3,000 military and overseas voters, also called UOCAVA in the earlier presentation. Since June of 2015, we've had over 171,942 voters who have been canceled or subtracted from the rolls for various reasons. And we've sent over 235,602 confirmation notices in that same time period. And as I said, we process the NCOA via ERIC every 2 months, and the changes can take up to 4 years to see. So that's our list maintenance and
Now we're going to take a test. That was excellent. Thank you, staff.
Overview
Excellent.
for the board, the new board members.
Do you have any hard copies of the last presentation?
The list maintenance?
oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it wasn't included in there. Yes, I'll get you.
That'd be great.
And
I
could
think
we-
it's on our website, isn't it?
It is not.
What?
It's not with meeting materials for
No,
today.
it's a repeat of a presentation we gave the board previously, but we
It's
can
been updated.
recirculate it and put it on the.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and Diane, you were, any questions, just ask.
I thought we were supposed to wait.
No, I mean,
No,
in
now
the
you
future,
can.
yeah.
This is the, yeah.
But anytime.
Question
But now
session.
you
If you
can-
have questions.
Yeah.
Jen, I have a question for Janet. So you test the equipment monthly for a while and then weekly.
No, we test the RC and upload sites
Oh,
once a month, and then weekly during the election month, and then the last test is the day before the election to make sure that line is still working.
do you find problems in the meantime?
We had one where it's a county line, but they've worked with the state to put all the firewalls and protections needed. And one of the county workers forgot and moved our line. And we went to test, and the line wouldn't work. It took like 5 hours to get that line fixed. And it was like the week before the election. So we had to stay there and wait for them to fix it. So it's good that we tested it. Believe me.
Again,
Did you have a question?
I have to go back and find it. I can follow up.
Okay.
Thanks.
I had a question on there was an election day and early voting. The pages aren't numbered, but one says early voting 2020. It has the hours, primary election and general election. And on the next page it says election day. And it has the voting hours from 7 to 8 p.m. on the election day page. And the prior page it says 8 to 8. Is it 7 or is it 8 or is it different?
No, it's
Early
different.
voting.
It's different for early voting.
Early
Voting only begins at 8.
Early voting in the primary begins in 10 a.m. and goes to 8 p.m. And then in the general election, presidential general election only, it goes from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Early voting.
And that's by state law.
Oh, okay.
And I did come up with one. For the pre-cert audit, who does all that? Is it permanent staff or is that still seasonal workers? Because it sounded like a lot of,
All of the above.
okay,
It's kind of an all hands on deck operation.
okay. Same group that's employed during the actual voting phase.
Normally, the certification group consists of the managers from our early voting sites.
Got it, okay.
Because they're seasoned, they know what they're looking for.
Some
and they can-
experience there.
Right.
Thanks.
Dave? I thought it was a great presentation, and thank you. Can the overview be put on the website?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, great. And then a question about polling place selection for Election Day, where we had a timeline for early voting as to how that process works, but we don't have one listed for Election Day, and I'm wondering at what point do we need to determine about which sites are available for the 2020 elections?
Well, Chris was working on that.
Right, I understand that
Okay.
Chris is out.
And, but we're still working, she's kind of working from home, even though she's
Not
really not
supposed
supposed to.
Right.
But in July, I expect to begin to tell you which polling places we get to return to, because they've been, the construction has been fulfilled.
Right.
Eric's been working on this, so Eric, do you want to jump in?
I wasn't sure what the timeline was for the presentation. I know we're doing early voting in July. I know that we have a list from the school as to what facilities are going to be under construction. I know it's a lot less than in 2018. It's a much smaller number than we had last go around.
Is that something that can be shared with us?
Not yet.
Not
I
yet.
can share it with you in July.
Okay.
Chris will be back.
Okay.
I will have had an opportunity to talk to some, because
Okay.
the other thing is that the individual who was assigned to work with us
Right.
from the school system, Sean Gallagher,
Right.
retired.
Okay.
So we have a new person.
Right.
So I need to work with her and Diane Jones.
Okay.
Okay.
The reason I ask is that obviously, as Eric anticipated, we're obviously very interested in having fewer of those situations, and I assume we will have fewer of those situations because we don't have a June primary. We have an April primary. I also read, I believe it was on the Bethesda Magazine website, that there's some question as to when Lux Manor Elementary School was going to be reopened, and they were considering between opening it during spring break, which would be in time for us, and opening it for the next school year, which would not be in time for us. Obviously, to the extent that we can return to our regular polling places, even if they don't open it as a school, even if it's just ready to be used as a polling place, that would be something that that we would be interested in. Hopefully, before it's too late to influence that that decision. Yeah.
The thing that I've been in this situation before, and the thing that kills us is the permit for occupancy.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the past, when we've had what I think is a building that's safe to go in, but the permits and inspection would not allow for a permit for occupancy. So that's how come I would suggest that we just wait and see what happens after we have the opportunity to talk with Diane Jones, and I'm drawing a blank on the other lady from Sean Gallagher, but we will have some material ready for you in July.
Okay. Thank you.
I did come across one other one. For the first-time voter registration verification, it shows the 3 different IDs that must be used, and this then will allow them to vote on the machine same day. What validation is there for citizenship? Because I know Maryland gives voter IDs to undocumented or not U.S. citizens. What sort of safeguard?
First of all, they filled out a voter registration form, which
with
is like
the
this,
affidavit,
and it says, are you a citizen, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Are you a U.S. citizen?
Are you a U.S. citizen?
And if they check yes, but they failed to show their identification, or maybe didn't send it in or whatever, or it's not validated, then they have to show their some sort of ID with their address. With their address, it has to be on there. And they're attesting that they are a qualified voter.
It's the affirmation process.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not
the honor system.
Yes.
They're
Not even
they're
close to
testing on
perfect.
the penalties of perjury. And obviously, it's a crime, but yeah, that's how they have to attest that they're a U.S. citizen, 18, eligible to vote.
But the other thing is if they're using their driver's license, now that you have real ID, and then you have to
I just
prove,
got it.
it's going to solve a lot of those issues.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Not immediately.
And the ID requirement for first-time voters, we require all or one?
No.
We require one.
One.
Okay.
Or they can verify. They can go through the verification, or they can provide it.
Right.
One or the other.
And it says not every voter, in fact, the vast majority of voters don't fall in this category, but it does show in the poll book, show ID. So, and notifies the election judge that individual has to present picture identification that, it can be a driver's license, it can be a Maryland identification, it can be military ID. The only one, it's a passport. It's like a passport. It can be a passport.
It can be a utility bill that has the addresses in 3 months. of issue. But remember, 90% of our registrations for new registrants are coming through the MVA or online, which automatically verifies them because they must provide a Maryland driver's license number. So it's only 10% of the voters who are coming through other means that aren't.
But it doesn't verify their citizenship.
Maryland doesn't have a documentary proof of
No,
citizenship
it's by affirmation.
Exactly.
Right, it's
It's in the Constitution.
not even valid.
Excellent presentation.
I want to give credit to the staff. Everyone presented, contributed.
I think a main takeaway for Elise and Diane, you know, after the election, everybody thinks our job is over, but for the next 2 weeks, you really have to block out your time.
A minimum of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Last time.
That's the biggest.
Right, right, assuming no recounts.
Yeah, well,
No, no,
then
yeah.
the recount, any of us who.
And with the canvassers, just to boil it,
Campaign
you know, with the
and-
we become Board of Canvassers. Basically, our function is to resolve issues that the counting teams have problems with. We sit as like a judicial, like an appeals court, in effect, to what comes to us as questionable or they can't decide.
I like how you translated that into legal speak for our two lawyers.
Although Margaret will have us doing counting and other functions too.
We pass candy.
Yeah. Kevin, board attorney report.
Sure. So, just by way of background, Judicial Watch had filed a suit against the State Board of Elections and the Montgomery County Board of Elections because they had made a request under the NBRA for certain voter registration materials. The Montgomery County Board of Elections was simply copied on the request and was not sent directly to this board. So we moved to dismiss the Montgomery County Board of Elections, and Judge Hollander granted that motion. The discovery continued as it related to Judicial Watch's suit against the state board. They went through discovery, and they now have filed cross motions for summary judgment, which are pending in front of Judge Hollander in the United States District Court for the District of Maryland. And we're simply waiting for a decision. The crux of the case really comes down to a state statute that basically provides that you need to be a registered voter in Maryland to go ahead and get a voter registration list. Judicial Watch, notwithstanding the fact that they had actually lawyers in the case that lived in Montgomery County, they took this as an opportunity to challenge the statute as being preempted by the National Voter Registration Act. And so I suspect Judge Hollander will issue an opinion in the next 3 or 4 months on the issue. So that's what's going on with Judicial Watch. I looked this morning on the Supreme Court's website, and it issued 4 decisions today. But one of those decisions was not Maryland's redistricting case. They did issue an opinion in the Virginia redistricting case, a 5-4 decision, where the lower court had found that the lines drawn in Virginia in certain districts were unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court took the case, and then because the appeal was not actually filed by the state of Virginia, but the House of Representatives of Virginia, the Supreme Court has ruled that the House lacked standing because they had intervened in the case and they had participated all the way through discovery and a trial, but because they had entered the case as only intervening and not being the named defendant, the Supreme Court determined they did not have standing to appeal, and so that was the basis of the Supreme Court's decision. They didn't reach the merits of that case. I would think that the Supreme Court issues opinions every Monday, and I wouldn't be surprised if they issue an opinion in the next 2 weeks in the Maryland redistricting case.
Do you think Virginia will reapply?
I don't think so, and I think they're barred as untimely. They're just going to redraw their lines at this point. So that's where we are on Supreme Court Judicial Watch. There have been 2 FOIA requests that have been filed. One just simply for voter registration records, and I've been working with Jessica just to go ahead and get that out. A more comprehensive request has been filed by the Brennan Center for a variety of records.
They're easy to get to.
Yeah, and we're just compiling answers to those Freedom of Information Act requests.
Can you give us a sense as to what they asked for?
They asked for a number of registered voters, number of election judges utilized in the last general election, how many were expected, how many showed. The
Polling places.
Polling
polling
places,
places.
budget, how much money was spent.
Yeah, going back to.
Why?
I have no idea.
Because they can.
Yeah.
You don't need a reason.
We were picked out of 4,000 national precincts, counties, or they're doing all the counties, or any idea?
I think they're doing research. It's a research project.
Oh, God.
So,
They may very well send it to a variety of jurisdictions. So that's where we are on that. About a year and a half ago, Tacoma Park had come forward, I think it was about a year and a half ago, and in an effort to improve their voter participation in the municipal elections, they wanted to move the date of their municipal elections to coincide with the general election, and wanted to know whether the board would be receptive to allowing that to occur. Now, their municipal elections would occur in a different room, with the exception of one location at Don Bosco. We're going to have to put a divider up. But this board at that time said that they were fine with that, and the staff has been working with Tacoma Park to go ahead and work on the logistics of that. I have looked at the MOU. We're close to finalizing it, and basically, we're just going to share space. They're not going to use our equipment. They're going to pay for their own equipment. They're going to use a different room. They couldn't use our equipment anyway because they have ranked choice voting and other problems that wouldn't be.
They have voters that we don't have.
Yeah,
So they have different poll
yeah, they've got
books.
a variety of
Yeah.
issues.
they are not using our poll books.
Right.
How many precincts are we talking about? It can't be that many.
Six.
6 out of
Yeah, it's not
200.
many.
And so will people
Go ahead.
go in and vote, and say the one that's sharing the space, they're going to go vote for their local election, then they walk over, stand in line again, and
That
vote
was
for
my
the.
question.
We'll have a greeter there that will go ahead and
I mean,
point.
just practically.
If you want to vote first in the Tacoma Park, or you have the opportunity to vote in both, or and they'll be directed to go from one room to another.
Otherwise, people will be driving to two places also, right, where they're not sharing the space.
The precinct lines that we have are, except for one of 9, are, I believe, contiguous. Contiguous on
Yeah.
4 out of the 6. And then there's 2 that are not. Your first address was one of them. But it's not, if they're in our poll book, we'll let them vote their regular ballot and say, go over to Tacoma Park, and if you have a problem, call Tacoma Park City Hall and they'll fix it for you.
Okay, good.
So that's going to get finalized shortly. The final thing is Jessica's reminded me of something that those who sat through the primary provisional canvass will remember very well, which is the provisional ballot application has in Part 2 this language that says, if this is a primary election, pick the ballot you want to vote.
Yes.
And
Can we change it?
I've been requesting that the board authorize Jessica and I to work on just preparing a letter for you all to review and send to the state board, asking that the language in this section be changed, because to me it's confusing.
Yeah.
And I think we get a lot of people that go ahead and they read, pick the ballot you want to vote, as opposed to that you're eligible to vote.
Right.
So moved.
So they can say, give me a Republican if they're a Democrat.
Right.
I think.
Right.
And they did.
Right.
They did.
They do, and then then we don't count their vote because
Right.
they're not registered the right way. But they
Yeah,
just
so
say,
it's right
"Oh,
written. A Republican could say, I want to vote the Democrat.
right, the
I
Democrats
second-
look interesting this time. I'll take that
second
one."
David's motion.
Yeah.
Yes. Any discussion?
Third.
All those in favor? That's unanimous.
Aye.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and do
That's
that.
an action item.
Yes, it is.
See?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I actually have a couple already.
And
But
put
yes.
an asterisk on that.
Yes.
That's something Alan's going to raise
Yeah.
later
Yeah.
about the action items.
That's all I have.
I don't know if this is the right time, but at some point, maybe you could give a presentation to the new members and us on the open meetings law.
There you go.
Yes.
It's something that we at our last conference was raised, and there's a lot of conversation about how we communicate online, and I think that's something we should address.
Okay. I certainly will, and there is open meetings compliance training that's available online as well.
Oh.
So-
Well, don't we have to send somebody? We have to send one of our board members to
It's
somebody.
one person
Yes.
needs to be, and then
It's
there's
online.
Yes.
But
bylaws
it
say
means
one
do it
person
online.
has to go do it.
Lisa and I.
But isn't there somebody that has to go from?
I
Yes.
believe one of the board members.
Yeah, it's in
Yeah,
bylaws.
I volunteered David because I volunteered Mary Ann when she was the secretary the last time. And so David was, it did not need to be done for this meeting because we weren't going to have an executive session, but you're correct that if the board is ever to meet in executive session, there needs to be a board member that has gone through the open meeting compliance training and received a certificate.
And I'm going to do it and be happy
How long
to
a
share with
training
you
is
whether.
Thanks.
I don't think it's
It's
very
not-
very long, and I'll send you the link.
I mean,
Yeah.
is it like
It's
3
easy.
hours?
Yeah,
Oh,
and-
no, it's less than,
and-
it took me, I came in on Sunday and did it, and aside from one phone call from my brother, I was done in an hour and 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And then you
Assuming that it's
sign
not
it.
a violation of the Open Meetings Act, I would be happy to share with people after I take it how long it took me.
Great.
Um,
And I'd love to get the link.
And
That'd be great.
then they
Thanks.
send you the certificates, you sign
No,
in.
you print it out.
Oh, you print it out at the time. Oh, just
The honor system.
That's good, Kevin. Thanks.
We didn't
But you
ask
don't wanna
Kevin
screw
when the
up your
letter's
work.
going to come back to us.
Kevin,
It
why don't you send us-
pre-populates your name and a certificate.
Yeah,
Why don't you
so
send
you
us
and
all the
you
link?
and Jess are going to work on that. We
Yeah.
have by the next meeting.
Oh, yeah, next
Well-
week.
Right. I mean, and then we have to. We're going to review that
Right.
between. I mean, whenever it's ready.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll send it out,
Okay.
send it out to everyone for
Okay.
review and comment, get it out.
Okay.
I just don't want to fall into the category of the state saying it's too late to change the form.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
we've already ordered the form.
Right.
Right. Which.
No, that's important.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Margaret, your report.
Yeah, personnel, we do have several temporaries still with the IT staff performing duties as requested by the state board, and we do have some outreach staff going out and doing various events. This is our busiest time of year because it's nice and the Strawberry Festival, so we do have some temporaries working. Budget.
Budget. You have a copy of our budget with line item detail breakdown for fiscal 19 in your packet. We are in a surplus situation, but barely at this point. We are projecting to have a deficit by the end of the fiscal year, which we have been expecting since the beginning of the fiscal year. The Office of Management Budget is well aware of that and in touch with us. Basically, we had a triple whammy this fiscal year. Last fiscal year, we returned a surplus to the general fund. The election was the very last week of the fiscal year. And so, number one, there were some expenses from the primary election that we were unable to pay out of last fiscal year's funds that needed to come out of this fiscal year's funds. So that was thing one. Thing two was that we had the 2 recounts that we conducted after the primary, which was unbudgeted for expenses with a lot of personnel costs to do the recount, those 2 recounts. And then third, we had additional costs associated with the unprecedented 3-card ballot that we had for the last election. And so really between those 3 things, we find ourselves where we are projecting a deficit by the time we get that 4th quarter state bill for the fiscal year. You can see as you go down the line items that we've got, the money was coming out of basically our temps and overtime. And so that's where we are in the budget.
So we're not going to have a surplus.
Oh,
We're not going to have a surplus.
Right,
Right
you're
now,
gonna
we
have a
are
deficit.
about $100,000 in surplus with another pay period remaining before the end of the fiscal year and a 4th quarter state bill still to come.
Do we have to go and ask for the money, or how is it going to work?
It depends how bad
It's going to be close.
Depends how badly we're in the hole. So it may be a year-end transfer. So that means another department that has a surplus will have to cover our deficit.
or we go before the county council and have a supplemental.
And does the county take care of the transfer of money from another department, or do we have to deal with it in another department?
No, it's all done.
It's all
by the
done
county.
at
Finance.
someplace in the web. Wow.
Nahid wanted me to ask, do we have any outstanding bills right now?
We have fourth quarter state board of election. That'll be the biggest bill of all.
What's that usually
Some
about?
bills.
We have an estimate? No,
Last time, what was
It's
it?
so hard to say.
400,000.
Okay. It's a big number.
Yes, it's always a big number.
What does that mean, fourth quarter state board of election?
The state board provides us services. First of all, we have to lease the equipment. Then we have program management charges. We have, I'm blanking out, there's 4 categories. Oh, MD voters, the voter registration system, and poll books.
They allocate the overall contract based upon the size of the jurisdiction. So Montgomery County is fortunate enough to pick up the biggest part of the ticket because of the size of the jurisdiction.
On your budget spreadsheet, you've got, it's color coded, and the ones that you have that are light yellow are the line items that we charge bills from the state that are, where we have to reimburse the state for charges.
I remembered that.
So,
I didn't realize it works that way.
so we have, we're roughly 300,000 over on overtime and about almost 400,000 over on seasonal temps. Is that all from the recount, or is there?
The vast majority of it is from the recount. There's some of it that is from the primary election.
All the canvas costs were in fiscal year 20, or I'm sorry, fiscal year 19. Since election day itself was in that last week of the fiscal year, so we've got a
Right.
lot of the overtime and the temporary to close out the primary election.
But was that not anticipated? I mean,
We
obviously.
could not
It's not
transfer
budgeted
the
for.
money to, we were unable to transfer the money to the next fiscal year to pay for it. We had to pay for it out of this fiscal year.
So originally it was budgeted to be paid for out of the previous fiscal year,
Yes,
and then they wouldn't let us transfer it?
yes.
Archie tried.
Yeah.
And is that a legal reason why they wouldn't let us transfer it, or is there a policy reason why they wouldn't let
And
us
who is
transfer
they?
it?
County
Yeah.
or county or state?
Yeah.
County. I don't have an answer for you. Margie tried to get finance to transfer money into the next fiscal year, and they refused. So.
Okay. I think it would be useful for us to know for the next, obviously it won't be an issue for this fiscal year, but we have surpluses often, or we've had surpluses often enough in the past. It would be useful to know if that is ever going to be an option, or if it's never going to be an option to move money from one year to the next. I know in the federal government you can't, but the rules are different, and so it would be useful if someone could let us know for next month
You
what
can
the
add it
rules
to
are.
your list of reasons to convince the General Assembly not to schedule primary elections for the last
month of June.
Right, but until we convince them of that, it would be useful for us to know what the rules are.
There was a
the
lot
funding.
of time and effort that went into working with the Office of Management and Budget on how to account for the closeout of fiscal 18, going into budgeting for fiscal 19. It will be a pretty significant research effort to try to go back and resurrect all of that.
I'm not seeking a historical look.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeking a conclusion as to whether we can do it in the future. If it comes the 2022 election, and we have a surplus for the fiscal year that includes the 2022 primary, would we be able to use some of that money to pay for the canvass for the 2022 primary election? I mean, it's the historical aspect of that is only relevant if they told us that there was a legal or systematic reason why they can't do it.
Karen, did you want to jump up
I know what you mean. In the federal government, we do have prior year and carryover funds, and how it's labeled. So from what I'm learning, just the month that I've been here, the answer is no.
The answer is no to what?
The answer is no. You cannot, unless it is unless these expenses are incurred during that fiscal year,
Right.
you can pay for, how do I say this? If an expense is incurred in 2018, you can use 2018 funds to pay them. If
Okay.
you incur it in 2019 fiscal year, you can use 2019 funds to pay them.
Okay.
So,
But if we were speaking in terms of the federal government, you have
Yes.
the concept that I'm sure you know of continuing need. And in this case, the election that takes place in one fiscal year causes the need for the expenditure in the next fiscal year. If this was the federal government, we would make the argument that that's an unseverable expense and that you could use it across fiscal years.
And I don't believe that the Montgomery County,
so if it was a
Does-
contract, I know some people try to avoid that by putting it on a contract and trying to prepay.
Yeah,
It
that doesn't work.
No,
No.
you can't do that.
and that's what Margie
Because you
tried
won't know
to
what
do.
the costs are.
Margie
Yeah.
tried to do that.
Well, not only that, it doesn't change how the costs are incurred by putting it on a contract. It's just somebody else spending it. You're still spending it the same way.
Margie did try to
Okay. But it sounds like...
encumber the funds
Right.
to be paid, and it was a no-go.
So it sounds...
It's
Yeah.
a different accounting procedure for this county.
Right.
And we will research it for you.
Okay.
And try to get the answer to you.
Okay.
In the month of July.
That would be that would be great.
If not,
Yeah.
we will try to get it to you
Right.
later.
Right. No, that's fine. It just sounds like it would be good for us to know for planning purposes because we have to put those expenses into one budget or the other. And if our budget is less, we're going to want to explain why. And if our budget is more, we're going to want to explain why.
Well,
So-
we've been explaining
so-
to the Department of O&B for a long time.
No, I'm talking about the public.
Yeah, I just want to say
Yeah.
one last thing. If we had received, there is a way you can encumber funds. If we had received that bill, so let's say the fiscal year does end June 30th. If
Right.
we had received that bill by July, I think it's July 24th, July 30th, for those services,
Right.
then yes, we could encumber it
Right.
and
But
pay
these
it.
are our employees that we're paying to, for the most, right? Aren't
There's
most,
no invoice, yeah.
Right. Most of the expenses are for people who are going to come in and help us with the canvas. And I don't know that we've come up with a system yet where we can pay them
But
in
they
advance.
came in this fiscal 19,
Right.
Yeah.
not fiscal 18. So that's the difference.
Right.
They were working in this fiscal year.
Right.
And they use pay period.
Right.
carryover.
Right. No, understood. Okay. Thank you.
Voter registration.
So I sent out to everybody, hopefully you all received it, and your the new board members as well, the monthly statistical reports that I will send out around the beginning of every month. So according to that report, we had 660,233 active registrants and 57,795 inactive registrants for a total of 718,028 registered voters.
It's not in this packet, right?
We
I
sent
actually mailed it out
electronically.
to all of you.
Yeah, no, I saw that, but I like the fact that I almost printed out stuff and I see you provided it for us today, so that one I didn't, but thanks, just checking.
State Board of Elections?
State Board of Elections. So, State Board of Elections notified us the federal postcard application and the federal write-in application has been redesigned. The project manager for the voting equipment, Paul Allmeyer, resigned. He is the individual that was in charge of the State Board of Elections, DS200, 850, all the election equipment. So the state is looking to fill that position. The good news, if there is any good news to that resignation, is that Paul went to the EAC, the certification process of the voting equipment, and possibly because of his experience of working with the state and local boards of elections and election directors like me who are demanding this certification sooner rather than later. Maybe he will help get it to sooner. Our election equipment requests have been submitted for the upcoming election cycle. Montgomery County placed an order on April 30th and then again on May 6th, which increased the number of DS200s. We did put in a request for the ballot marking device, but all requests for the ballot marking devices are kind of on hold because we're waiting for the July board meeting by the state board to make their decision about the utilization of the ballot marking device.
What does that mean?
That means that if they believe that the certification with all the changes that were requested have not been, are not going to be ready to be certified and implemented, the ballot marking device with all of the rules that we're required to follow. So, for instance, with the ballot marking device, we're limited. I think is it one per polling place? Okay, supposedly we're supposed to only send one ballot marking device to a polling place, and maybe two to an early voting site.
Whose limit is that?
That's the state's board.
Okay.
And if you put anything more than that out, and the state finds out, they call you up, chew you out, and tell you to break it down and not use it. And Kevin can verify
behind that.
Sure, there is. They don't, the state's sort of in the middle here. There are a lot of people that don't like the current ballot marking device because of the limitations in terms of the number of candidates you can have on a page.
That same old thing.
And the navigation.
And the navigation. So
Right.
those are two issues that they received a lot of pushback on. It was not user-friendly to most voters. So that's on the one hand. The National Federation for the Blind, on the other hand, likes the ballot marking device because it allows their voters to vote independently without having any assistance from someone else. So the compromise was that they would have they would have a ballot marking device in each polling place so that it can be used by everyone to the extent, but really it was to make sure that the National Federation for the Blind wasn't going to sue them again.
Thank you. I thought, my question really is about, I thought is it who makes that? ENS. I thought they were going to fix it, and
right now
makes me
so
tired.
It is being in the process of the certification process.
So that's what we're worried about, the certification. That's down in Washington, right?
Yeah.
So the state didn't want to pay for it to get it done by 2018. This is equipment that was purchased in 2016. So they didn't want to do the upgrade because it was going to be a two-prong upgrade for 2018. And now they're working on it for 2020.
Is this the one we were going to write a letter about?
The board did write a letter.
And did we get an answer? Have I heard it?
The answer was they're evaluating whether they're going to meet the certification requirements to make it a viable option.
Now, is this the letter that's on our website from Linda Limo?
Yeah.
Because we didn't get that sent to us or in our packet today.
I thought you sent that out.
I don't think so. Do you remember getting it, Jackie?
No, was that on our, it wasn't on the agenda, though.
Well, the question is whether it should have been.
It's my mistake. I received it from the law firm, Kevin's law firm. I thought it went out to everybody. I did not look that closely.
All right, so we're where we were 2 years ago.
Correct.
I'll set it up.
There's no change.
Right.
Well, ES&S has not told us when. The change is in Washington. Is there anything we can do to speed that up other than our friend going down there?
No, that's a certification process that has to go through whatever certification process is with the EAC and meet the qualifications and requirements that the Election Assistance Commission says is required.
All right, I just wondered if there was any ways we could have them put it in front of something else that was certified. No, you don't know of any way that we can pressure that.
No, there's no
action item.
new pressure
Which one?
process that we can utilize. The
Way
company,
more than
this
that.
is true of
You've seen
any
the letter?
company, whether it's
No.
ES&S or PART or.
But it's not in ES's hands now, right? It's in the EAC down in Washington, or wherever they are.
I don't know that's been entered yet, and I think in the letter, Linda Lamone said there was a previous addition, a previous change to the system, but it wasn't entirely what Maryland wanted, so they skipped that one and asked them to go back to the drawing board. So I think it was third in line last I heard, and so if it isn't up yet, it's going soon. But that's ES&S.
Last I remember hearing was they anticipated, or they were hoping for certification by like October
Of this year.
of this year.
That's
And is that soon enough or not?
Is that time enough to get?
State
The
board
que-
meeting to
this
talk about the
is,
next
this
meeting.
is a decision of the state board, and that's
Right.
what I think they're waiting for the certification. Whoever the private sector company is that's going through that's going and certifying the equipment to get back to ES&S, so ES&S can go to the state board and say, yes, this is going to be certified in time for us to utilize it. The election directors told Linda and Nikki that we wanted it by September 30th. Am I correct, Janet? We wanted it by September 3rd, the software, to do the upgrade.
And this is now scheduled for October.
That's the last I've heard.
So worst case scenario, it doesn't get certified, what happens?
We utilize it the way it's been utilized previously.
But that is a worst case scenario. It'll be the third election since the problem was discovered before it was being fixed. So I mean, this problem was discovered when the equipment was used in the Rockville City election as a kind of a test case, and we can all fill you in on some of the twists and turns ever since that time. Our board has been very vocal in wanting the change to be made from the very beginning, but for a variety of reasons, it hasn't happened, and to go another election without it does seem to be less than desirable, to say the
That's
least.
a very nice way to put it.
Yes.
And
Is it disenfranchised voters if it doesn't get certified?
No,
it has to be certified.
It has to be certified. What we have right now is certified under the old standards.
Okay.
And so we can deploy it by in accordance to the state board regulations. So that would be one per polling place, one per early voting site, unless I go to the state board staff and beg to get one or more. It's the audio ballot that we have to prove. Once that is approved, and the ballot is approved by myself and sent over to the state, and then the state loads it into electionware, then it's ready to be utilized on election day. My problem with the current ballot marking device is that they make it highly cumbersome. We have to read off a page of instructions if an individual wishes to use it. Kevin goes to Potomac and tests it, or Germantown, or wherever, and I do too. And you have to sit there and listen to this individual go through a set of instructions while he's looking at this first page, and it's not really it's not user-friendly the way that they put it together.
Okay.
But if it was user-friendly, you could load every ballot style and use it effectively for early voting.
Right. The reason why we have so many ballot styles at early voting is because of the fact that they won't let us use the ballot marking device for that purpose. The original plan, as I understand it, someone will correct me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong, but the original plan was to use the ballot marking devices for early voting so that you wouldn't have to keep all of those ballot styles straight. Because especially in the gubernatorial years, when you have 70 some ballots to keep straight. It's a lot easier for a machine to figure out, to pull up the right ballot style for you rather than to, our people are good, but they're still human beings.
Also, the ballot marking device will tell you, are you under voting? Running for 3 people for delegate, and you vote for 2. And it will ask you, are you done, or do you want to vote for a third? Also, if you vote for 4 people rather than 3, it'll kick it out until you fix it. We found it at Praisner, which was like the worst of the Dirty Dozen. We found I was sending people to the ballot marking device because the tables being used for filling out paper ballots, they were full, but it wasn't quite as full for the ballot marking devices. So I was sending people over there, trying to keep it balanced to move the lines along.
My problem with the reason I originally asked the question and made Margaret cringe because I asked her 400 times. I want to get it on the tape that we don't understand why this company that's making this can't get it done.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's reasonable.
I am sorry, I thought it was going, I just didn't read carefully enough.
Okay.
Well, I thank you because now I get to see the issue.
But they did respond. The good news is they did respond.
Right. Although I just saw this for the first time while sitting at the table here, and I was looking for, I was looking online to see what was made available to the public and saw that this was there. So I haven't really had a chance to read it, but it does seem like there's some dispute over how much opportunity we had to comment in the past, and without. I'm not trying to litigate all that now, but obviously if there are opportunities for us to weigh in with the state, we want to take advantage of those any chance we can.
This is obviously off my desk, and I was discussing this matter with Janet, and one of the things it says that we could come to a meeting on August 27th, 2017 to talk about the ballot marking device. We were also mandated to attend a 3-day smart sheet on that particular day. And I have certainly sent plenty of comments to Paul Allmeyer with regards to the ballot marking device. So if you want me to put together something that refutes Linda's remarks, I can, but...
only if it helps us move forward. I mean, I don't know how that was going to help us move forward. What I want is us to get it certified and get them, are they going to modify the ones we have, or are they going to make new ones, and can we buy new devices so there's more than one per precinct?
We cannot buy anything.
No, can we ask? I understand.
The only thing that can happen is that the state approves the upgrade so that Janet and her IT team can approve or update the current equipment we have, the software that's there.
And you can update what we have, plus we can ask for more.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why.
Thank you.
I put in a request for additional ballot marking devices, but everybody's request for additional ballot marking devices as well as additional poll books are on hold.
Well, and this electronic poll book comment, I know that you answered
they want
that.
the next meeting is June 27th,
Oh, yeah.
and they say that they've issued surveys to the board.
Right. Now, have we gotten that?
The survey?
Yes.
Yes, I think we did, and we filled it out.
Can we know what we said?
Yeah.
Because to me, what this said to me was that I just want to. I don't need to feel like we need to get into a volley of letters back and forth, but I'd like to have at least the basics on what they say wrong and what we did. And for the future, I definitely would want, whenever information can be shared, that it be shared, because I think that all of us weighing in on some of these issues may be even more effective than just Margaret going to the state or just whoever attends the state board meeting. Because I know we all have an interest in the navigation issue with the ballot marking device, and we all have an interest in making sure that the poll books are working correctly.
Well, maybe my recollection is incorrect. Someone will correct me, but I remember when they announced that the poll book, the ballot marking devices could not be used for 2018.
Right.
Mary Ann was quite animated.
Yes, we all were.
Because she had attended the board
right.
meetings at the state where they said this would be corrected.
Right. This would be corrected. No, and then we got the very legalistic letter from ES&S's counsel, in which he basically said, while it was discussed at the meeting that it could be corrected, no one ever told us to correct it. And I guess that what I'm saying is that I'd like us to do everything we can to make sure that they are told to correct it, so that they don't have at least that as their response.
My understanding they are corrected.
Yeah.
Did you said, Margaret, the machines are ready to be used, the machines are sitting there, or the information of how to change it. We're waiting for the feds to certify, and the feds hire a company that does the certification. Is that the correct method?
Yes.
Okay. So somewhere along the way, perhaps we can put pressure on them.
I'm not really sure how you would put pressure on a third-party vendor who is supposed to be neutral in terms of
Getting it
whether or
ready,
not
yeah.
this
I don't have a
equipment is
problem with that
working
at all.
according to the requirements of the contract.
Is the timeline that they operate under, is it a legal requirement? Is it just in the order in which they receive them? Is there anything we can do to get them to respond by September instead of October? If that will make a difference to the state being able to implement this?
Jessica, are you certain whether it's even been submitted for testing yet?
No, they said
I'm not certain either.
No, I asked when we were
Well, the
at
letter
Mayo.
said it was.
I asked at Mayo, and they said it had been submitted.
Well,
I asked Todd Roosevelt.
well, that should be a factual question that we can get the answer to.
We'll find out the answer to the
I think
exact status.
I agree with you, David, and I think we could get the answer to has it been submitted, and what does the contract say? What's the timeline? Exactly what's the timeline? Who is it?
Yeah, if we can get that information, that's helpful.
Because if there is an opportunity for us to do anything to encourage the timeline to, at the very least, be adhered to, if not move faster.
We can certainly find that out.
Yes.
Did you find that out, Allison?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay.
I just want to remind the board that the contract, even though it's the contract with ES&S, because this has been pounded into my head by the state board staff, is with the state.
Right.
Well, if we get the information.
But the state needs to be transparent with us.
I'm not going to disagree with you.
Well, and the only opportunity we have to influence this is by talking to the state and to the state board members or the elections director, and to indicate what a high priority this is for us. Because like you say, it's theirs, it's not ours. But we have a big interest in,
And I'm not the only election director that has articulated that. But
right.
Yes.
Well, we just want to add some board members to support you on this.
Well, possibly along the way here, we want to write a letter. And maybe we want to ask those other counties that are concerned about it to join us in a letter with some strong requests.
Yeah, we get the information. Let's see what we can do.
We'll get you the information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Legislation?
Just, let's see. Early voting locations. So.
No legislation?
No legislation. I think we've finished the wrap-up for the General Assembly last board meeting.
Yeah, they're out.
I did share a copy, and at least I think I had an outdated email address for you, but I just sent to you this morning the copy of the legislature's 90-day report that we had circulated to the board at the last meeting. There were no surprises in terms of what the governor either signed or everything became law without a signature that we had been involved in or reporting on.
Please, in that regard, emails. Can we get a list of everybody's phone numbers and emails?
It's in here.
Is it? I didn't see it. With the new members?
Yes, I wanted to thank you that.
Oh,
Thank you.
I didn't see that. Thank you.
Can you
Where is it?
send it electronically?
It's in there.
Oh, it's up by.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see it. Thank you. Where is it?
It lists a home phone number for me that never actually gets answered, so don't bother.
Oh, good.
But my cell number's on there.
I'll find
Oh,
it.
yeah. Don't
Thanks.
bother with
Good.
my
I'll
own.
have to David's. I don't answer mine either, so
Yeah.
I'll call my cell phone.
Yeah, my home phone, get it. It's
Okay.
just for marketers.
Early voting locations.
So, David wanted some additional information, so there is this document that's in your packet, and it says exactly what has been
reserved
Oh, good.
for
I got it.
early voting. Germantown, we'll only be able to use the social hall because that is a shared facility with the Kingsview Middle School, and they use the gym. So we're going to use the social hall.
The social hall is where we've been before?
Yes.
Okay.
We have to meet with the activity center at Ford Park but there is a big issue with the gym, and that is there's approximately 5 electrical outlets in the gym, and we would have to install electricity in there, and I'm going blank on the name of the box, but Kevin and I, and I guess Kevin and Eric will have to go meet with Ford Park and see what it would cost to install electrical. I did already talk to the county and ask them if we were to select Ford Park and if we were given permission to utilize the gym, could they do it for us, general services, and no, they cannot.
Why don't they just get
cannot.
a better location?
So, well, there is another location in Gaithersburg. It's the Upper County Community Rec Center at 8201 Emory Grove,
That is
social hall.
a very different location.
It is a different location.
It's quite different.
Well, you're going to give us staff recommendations in July?
I will give you an answer to the activity center at Ford Park. And
That's almost comical.
well, it's a gymnasium. I mean, it's 2 gymnasiums.
Yeah, but we have lots of gymnasiums that we use for our early voting centers.
But this is not the county's gymnasium.
Right.
So we will talk to the
Right.
city of Gaithersburg, and just we will talk to the city of Gaithersburg.
Could you please let us know beforehand the date of that meeting? Because there's at least one elected official who has offered to help, who I think it would be a good idea for us to take him up on his offer.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I was the board member assigned to Ballot Park in the last election. I think the gym is right there. The voters love that spot. It handled a lot of people. It even handled a lot of people when we had another activity going on there that obviously we don't want to repeat, but it was able to do so. I personally believe that getting the gym in that location is a very, very high priority. And I think that we should think very hard before we move locations of our polling places. We should only do that when we have to. And I realize that the lack of electricity is obviously an issue, and when I say have to, we have to make sure we have the electricity. But if there's anything we can do to make that happen, I think it would be well worth pursuing.
Let me follow up with that.
Can I just comment that Chris and I have talked to the people that are running the activity center, and we have asked that possibly we have a second room to allow the election judges a rest area, opening up more space in that one room.
That one room will not handle the people, with or without the break room for the election workers. And that gym is huge. It's like 2 gyms.
Yeah, but they don't have electricity to accommodate our needs.
There's very few electrical outlets.
I mean, that's
in
the bottom
wall,
line, isn't
or
it?
There's only one in the floor.
Well, it's
So
not a
I'm
bottom line
just-
until we know whether we can install electricity there or not.
Well, who's going to
That's
pay for it? We're not going to pay for
Yeah,
it.
the way it goes
The
right
county
now.
council will be very amenable to I'm sure, they've been very supportive of our efforts to make sure that everyone can vote and they've given us resources to make sure we keep lines under control. Borough Park had very significant lines during
good site.
during that last election, and so we I think we need to consider whatever we can.
We'll see what they.
I talked to Sid Katz about this, and you've already gone past the idea of resistance of using the gyms and gotten at the nitty-gritty practical issue with electricity. But you may want to contact Sid Katz, let him know what's going on. Maybe he can find some way of helping find the money to do the electrical work.
Alan?
We will.
Yeah, we will too.
I will talk to the city of Gaithersburg. I will talk with the city of Gaithersburg, with your board attorney, and we will reach out to Mr. Katz.
Good.
I do want to, we're talking about things that, that haven't been paid for. I mean, one of the things that's still outstanding is the state is still going on with that. We're going to have to spend $1,000 per precinct for a network, and we have 236 precincts, and that's another $236,000. $1,000 per precinct.
That's a state mandate?
That could be, and I've been
no state money.
Advising. Well, it should be at least a 50-50 split.
Right, that's what it should be, at least, yeah.
But right now it's not, and so that's one of the things that I've also been trying to address once again.
Marvin, do you think that's where they're going? That we're going to need that as connectivity?
What did you say, Kevin?
I said, do you think that that's going to be a requirement? In other words, we're going to need to spend the $1,000 for each polling place? Because if it is, then we should be reaching out to MACO to start lobbying hard for
state match,
sure it is a 50-50
at least.
split.
Yeah.
Well, I do think, I think it's, yes, the answer's yes. I have reached out to our county lobbyist, Kathleen Boucher, and said that we need to reach out to MACO because this is crazy that we're paying for this. And I mean, when are we starting to test this network to see if it works?
The state hasn't given us a time frame.
When is a good time?
For me, what the network, I don't know what the network issue is, just like in a sentence.
I'm going to let Janet explain this network thing.
I didn't hear.
I just, like, in a sentence or two, can you just tell me what this issue is with the networking, that we're possibly going to be on the hook for $1,000 more per precinct? What's wrong with the current network?
We don't have a network on election day, only for early voting. And the network is used for same-day registration and also to make sure voters haven't gone to several different early voting sites to vote. So when you vote, it sends
that's the network we're talking about.
Yeah.
What have we used in the past?
and we need it for election.
We didn't have to do it in the past.
We don't have same-day voter. Previously,
Oh, this is for that.
Same day.
Thank you.
Election day,
Okay.
same-day voter registration.
Yeah, so Diane doesn't go to 7 different
Yes.
Yeah, well, no, so we don't have 7 different people voting, one person voting in 7 different places.
Right, exactly.
So the problem that
right.
becomes is they all have to be connected
Oh, my Lord.
somehow.
And so if somebody decided to do same-day registration and they're telling us we have to pay for all the upgrade to make this happen?
Yes.
State board.
The
Well,
question is whether we do or whether we don't.
Should be split.
There was
though.
an active discussion about this in the legislature as the bill was moving forward. My perception
The bill
was
for
that
what?
the way
The bill for same-day registration
was
is now
written,
law.
Not the money.
that it did not require network connectivity on election day. If your address has changed, then you will either be voting in the polling place where your name is on the rolls, or if you show up at a polling place where your name is not on the rolls, then you'll be voting by provisional ballot. My understanding was that the network connectivity on election day was not required. But the discussions that we're having now, it appears that there's another interpretation.
Well, you were just saying if there's an address. If you're a first-time registrant, there is no address.
Right. So we can see, when we look you up in the poll book, we can see...
You won't be there if you're...
You'll be there, but you'll be there...
But you'll have to
They're
provide
pre-registered
ID.
people.
I can only check you in and give you a live ballot if you are a previously registered voter in that polling place. If you are a previously registered voter who is not in that polling place, I can see you.
Right,
But I
get
can't
that.
check you in that polling place.
Right.
the way the law is written had seemed to me to say that that was not going to change on election day. The difference basically was going to be whether your provisional ballot was going to count or not when you do an address change.
Okay, I'm talking about,
The new person.
Right.
I just moved here from Minnesota.
what am I missing? I'm talking
The
about
new person would be able to, they're not
same day
there at all.
registration.
Right.
You
Can't
like
find
coming
you.
in, I'm here, give me my ballot.
You're here, you're
Right,
brand
isn't
new,
that-
I can't find you in the precinct, I can't find you in another precinct.
Right, because I've never registered.
You would be able to register and vote that day a live ballot.
But what
Right.
about going to 2 or 3 other
You
precincts?
supply
Jim.
the correct Maryland proof that you
That we
lived
went over and
Right.
that I questioned.
Right.
In that precinct.
Right.
But
The address you're
Diane's
giving is in
question
that
has
precinct.
been, I think, Diane, am I correct? Let me rephrase you. Why can't Diane go to 5 or 6 precincts?
That's what the network
no,
is for.
my question, I think has been answered, and that is, we need the
That's where
network
the
if we're
network
having
connectivity
single-day
is.
Right,
registration.
okay.
Can I just
I think Janet
explain
can
the network
explain
again?
Yeah.
The network for early voting.
Janet,
did
could you
it.
please get up?
Yeah, the network for early voting prevents people from going to 5 or 6 different
Right.
sites. Election day, it does not pertain to that, because if I go to my wrong precinct, you have to search the state to find me, and I'm
Right.
going to vote provisionally.
Right.
So I can't.
I got all that.
Right.
The
But
issue
the
is
new network
some
they
that-
want to do is for same-day registration.
That's like,
Exactly.
fully, I
So,
get it.
they want to do it sort of like early voting, where you're pre-registered. You bring up the MBA, and it says you're brand new, you never registered, but we have these pre-qualified people from MBA. So we pull you up, and it says Diane Nash Dillon is pre-qualified. We can process you. We can take your license, scan you in. You're good. You get a regular ballot.
That's the same thing that we've
Same
done
day
for early voting.
And
They-
we
but
want
they
to make
stripped out the
sure that I
address
can't,
changes.
like, get in my speedy car
Right.
and do that at 6 different locations, which is why we have to have this network, right?
No, you still could do that on election day, but if you go outside of your precinct, you're going to vote provisional, and we're going to catch it because you voted so many provisional ballots. We're going to see them all.
So you're
And
saying
we're
you
gonna
don't
watch
need
it.
the network?
That's
We
if
do.
you
I'm
got the
confused.
network.
No.
And John McCarthy will do that as well.
Networks
If
do
you
the
vote
matching.
outside of the
Too
precinct
much
you
talking.
live,
My son is not gonna.
no, if you vote outside of the precinct you live, you will be given a provisional ballot.
No matter
And
what.
that, it doesn't make any difference. If you vote 2 times, 7 times, 25 times.
Right, no, I get
We
it.
will
I-
have the 25 ballots, and we'll give them to Kevin, and then Kevin will write a letter and send all of your ballots
And
to
send you to
the
jail.
prosecutor.
Staff is just worked up over this, so that's why we all want to weigh in.
No, it's
Okay.
the matching to the NBA though, that's the connectivity.
That's the whole thing with the network, so we can match the MBA.
Do we want the network or not?
Because it's not within the full book, we have to go out.
Depends on what we're doing.
We have no choice.
With same-day
Depends on the procedure
registration,
we're
you
following.
have to have the network.
She said no. I think the law
No.
says no. They're saying
I'm
yes.
saying in my mind you have to. I'm not saying the law says.
We have no choice. It's up to the state, right?
The question is, as far as I'm concerned, is this network that the state is trying to establish,
Yeah, maybe I.
will it actually be connected to MBA, and will we actually have the pre-qualified individuals available in this network? Or is this network, the only thing that it's going to do is at 10 o'clock, the state pings it and says, Montgomery County's had 17% voter turnout. If that's all it's going to do, then that
They can
is
pay
a
for it.
huge waste of
Right.
money, as far as
Right.
I'm concerned. But if it's connected to the MBA, so that we can do what we do at early voting, then that's great. But
It's to prevent.
but we're not getting very good answers to our questions. And we had, Allison and I sat through an election direct meeting in which these issues were brought up. And nobody has any good answers. And part of the reason they don't have good answers is because one of the key people, Paul Allmeyer, resigned and now is working for the Fed.
Okay, so there's no way that we can have any input in this or do anything about it, except you're just giving us knowledge.
We're going to get a report back in July?
I hope so. Let's move on.
Okay.
Okay, wait times. I know I had something about wait times.
But wait, before we leave early voting,
Oh, yes.
we have a number of instances where we're saying social hall instead of gym. I just wanted to find out if there was a particular reason for that. Because for this particular election, where we expect turnout to be as high as it is, and given the fact that we've moved to gyms in almost all of our early voting sites, but not quite all of them, I just was wondering if there was a reason why we're not also looking at gyms in these alternate sites that we've been that we're talking about, and also for Damascus and.
We are in the gym in Damascus.
Well, it says here social hall.
Well, if you open up with dividing door, it becomes the gym. There's a lot of, I will talk to Chris about it, but sometimes these social halls have, I mean, for instance, Mid-County, the social hall is bigger than the gym.
Right. I'm familiar with Mid-County, but I'm also, in some of these other places, let's just say that if we've reserved the social hall in these other places, I think I'd like to know if reserving the gym is a possibility, because I wouldn't want us to lose out on a larger room simply because we reserved a smaller room. Because for 2020 in particular, I think we expect there to be very high turnout everywhere. And I think that we've had a number of experiences. Borough Park was the one that was most real to me, but we've had a number of experiences where both we've had difficulties when we didn't have the gym, and where we've had much less difficulty when we had the gym. We moved to the gym in Lawton, we moved to the gym in Potomac, and both of those, I think, were very good moves.
Yes.
Okay, the presentation when I spoke with the president of the board in May, I was expecting to do this presentation for early voting in July.
Yeah.
We are doing the presentation. I will talk to Chris about gyms. It was my understanding that we were selecting those facilities that had the most square footage. If you wanted,
I want to make sure that
I will talk to Chris. I will talk to Community on Use of Public Facilities and make sure that we are selecting, I mean, there's
the biggest space available.
Right, exactly.
In these potential locations.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, regardless of what they call it, Margaret's got a handle on this.
Okay, and then, right, so for the calendar, July presentation, the beginning of public comments. I don't know about August, September public comments. If you want us to go out and search for more locations after you see the presentation, and then the October board meeting, the board has to confirm what locations you want to select and submit to the State Board of Elections. And then there's also the issue of the statute or the law that recently passed allowing for a potential 12th site. And the board will have to address that at some point.
Potential what?
12.
12 sites.
And when do we have to do that by?
Well, if you're going to do that, you're still going to have to meet the current requirement that the deadline is October 28th.
Okay.
But the first thing, if you decide to do that in July, you wanted to go to a 12th site, I need to go to the Office of Budget Management and Budget and ask for money.
That's going to be on our July agenda? Okay.
So we get to vote whether we're going to do that or not?
You have to decide if you
if we want to have a 12 site.
reach out to and ask for approval by the county
for the budget
executive and the county council.
Okay, and another question about early voting. When we did this 4 years ago and 8 years ago, we heard from the public about the early voting sites. I didn't know if that's something that we want to do again or not.
Let's wait to see where the consensus of the board is after the July meeting.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. All right.
Wait times, is that also for July?
Wait time. What did I put Oh, the reason I put that, I mean, we did order extra equipment, but part of the reason I said wait time is pending decision of the state board related to the ballot marking device. Because if we're able to use the ballot marking device at early voting, that opens up a huge amount of equipment to utilize on election day that we didn't have access to in 2018 or 2016. So we should be able to give you a better answer on how much equipment is going to be deployed for election day versus under the different scenarios.
Okay, but on the other hand, the equipment was ordered before we got additional funding from the council for addressing wait times.
Right.
And I gather that we have things that we're going to do to address wait times that are beyond equipment.
Oh, yeah.
So can we have a discussion of that in July as to what the plans are for how to do that?
We're still developing those plans. Can I have at least until September to ballot these plans with the rest of the staff? I mean, it's not, there's no magic wand answer to this.
No,
but especially looking at the amount of equipment that we may or may not have, whether we're going to use ballot marking devices. For instance, at Mid-County, when we had long lines, I told Lisa Jones, bring me 4 ballot marking devices, and I'll take the beating from the state board so that we don't have lines. So that's where we're at.
Right.
September.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're gonna follow up on the minutes committee till July.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I would also like to say quickly along the way that we need to vote later, September or whatever, on asking Margaret to take care of those ballot marking devices so she doesn't have to take the heat we can.
Okay.
At the state board.
I'm sorry, you want us to vote?
Take the heat, but the state
Yes,
board.
in other words, we want to vote and basically instruct her to use the ballot marking devices like she's talking about.
Exactly.
Yes.
Jim, I had a comment about the action items for...
Yeah, I'm gonna new business.
Oh, sorry.
New business. I had 2 things. One, to our new members, in the past we've had 2 standing committees. We've had a budget committee and an outreach committee. And has Nahi talked to you, David, about the budget committee?
She has not, but we've talked about committee assignments on our side if you're interested.
Okay, budget committee. I know Nahi is on the budget committee.
Right. I think that if it's okay with you, we would like to appoint Alan to the budget committee and Elise to the outreach committee.
Okay.
Or communications, whatever
Jackie,
you call it.
you're on the outreach committee? So the outreach committee is Jackie and Alan?
No. Outreach committee is Jackie and Elise.
Okay, Jackie and Elise on the outreach committee, and the budget committee will be Naheed and Alan. Okay. And I think Alan may have mentioned it to me at the convention, but it's an excellent idea. Like today alone, I think there's like 5 or 6 things we talked about that, like Kevin's going to send us something and Margaret's going to do something. These things that people are going to do and by when. And Alan, why don't you give us your thought on that?
When Gabe Albornoz, presently county councilman, was the chair of the Democratic Central Committee, he proposed action items, and what he would do during the meeting, he would say that that's an action item. At the end of the meeting, he would go over the action items. Okay, so I'm going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do that. So people knew at the very end of the meeting who was going to be doing what coming forward and what the responsibilities were and when they would undertake them. So I think it's a good idea for us to do that.
And it should be memorialized.
I was making notes today, in fact. Maybe David was also.
Well, do we want to put them on like the next meeting to see if they were done? Mechanically, what do you suggest?
Well, what you could do, you or David at the end of the meeting could say, okay, here are the action items I have, and then somebody will record those and make sure that.
Well, we have a secretary now.
Will that be in the minutes?
Yeah.
And I have 8 things on the list right now for this meeting. If you want me to tell you what they are.
Why don't you give them to us?
Yes. Yes.
I would like to recommend in this
Yes.
context that halfway between now and the next meeting, maybe you check with Margaret how it's coming along and let us know if there's a problem that we can work with or address or something.
Yeah.
So that way, by the next meeting,
Okay, I'll check with the board president, correct?
Yeah, that's what she just said. That's what she just said.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so, ready.
David, action items.
Okay. Number one, the presentation on list maintenance and the general orientation presentation to be posted online.
Okay.
Do we want to indicate who is doing that, or is that just,
Yeah, we can,
Yes.
so we know who to blame.
Jessica will do it. It's
So
going
we
to
we
be
know who
part
to blame.
of,
if
No.
it doesn't.
Janet will do that. Janet posts up to the website.
okay, this will be part of
An
this.
email with a link is fine. It doesn't. I don't need an attachment personally. Yeah.
It was part of this. Do you want it separated?
No, there was some. It was. The list maintenance there was a separate
It was a
presentation
separate.
on list
Okay,
maintenance. It
that's
wasn't.
fine. I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
separate.
Was
Okay.
it the
Yes.
area thing?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Number two, Kevin and Jessica to draft a letter to MSBE on changing the provisional ballot form so that it no longer says which ballot do you want. It says which one are you eligible for.
Okay.
Number three, information on whether transfers of funds can be made across fiscal year lines.
Margaret. Is that Margaret?
It's going to be
Who's that?
Kira.
Oh, Kira.
Kira.
That one right now.
Okay. Number four, we've gotten a hard copy, but if we can get an electronic copy of the Linda Lamone June 3 letter, actually it's already on. It's on the website. If someone could just point us to it, that would be great.
Is it on our
Wait a
website?
minute.
What
It's
does
on
that
our
mean?
website, but it was not sent to us.
But what does that mean? Did we just get a copy right
We
here?
have a copy of it.
All right, fine. Skip it.
Yeah, skip that.
Skip that one. Okay. Number four, Allison is going to get the exact status of the ballot marking device certification. Number five, Margaret and Kevin will be talking to the City of Gaithersburg and reaching out to Councilmember Katz about the Boer Park Early Voting Center.
Electrical outlet issue.
Not just the electrical outlet issue, it's the
Gym-
gymnasium issue as well.
Gym/electric
Yes.
outlet issue.
Yes.
Yeah, you might as well specify what we're talking about to make it easier on them.
Well, they've got the whole recording to use it for that as well. And then at the July meeting, there'll be a discussion about the largest spaces for the early voting centers, as to and whether
So that's Lisa, agenda item?
Wouldn't it be easier just to let Margaret make the assignments? It's her staff.
Yeah, that's
That's
fine.
fine.
That's fine by me.
Okay.
Chris is the person that's in charge of early voting.
Okay,
Right.
No, Jackie's right.
Right. Number
Whoever you designate.
number 7 was in September, a discussion of the plans for wait times.
Yeah.
I have 7 already. You want you eliminated
I eliminated one. The Linda Lamone letter has been eliminated because it's already on the website under meeting materials.
I'm sorry, David, I interrupted.
That's okay, no problem. Okay, so number 7 was a discussion in September of the plans for wait times, and number 8 was a discussion in September of the use of ballot marking devices.
And then what David said will be in our minutes.
So I have two things that I wrote down. I didn't know if you wanted to follow up. You asked that the survey be provided to the board members?
Which
The
survey?
survey that came from the
Right.
State Board of Elections.
You're right, yes.
I got that.
That should be added too,
And this is good, because these items will be on our minutes, right?
yes.
And
Good.
then you would also like to talk about public hearing in July.
After
After the July, I'm sorry, after the consensus of the July.
Jim said he wanted
board
to,
meeting.
Yeah, whether we want to have a public hearing,
On the
early voting
So
sites.
that's not an action item at this time, that's pending.
But it's a future action
It is
item that needs
future
to be
action.
followed
This
up.
is a good idea, Alan, good idea, because I forgot half of them already.
Me too.
You know what I'm saying?
Put it down on his computer.
That's
Yes,
good.
well,
The other thing
and
that I
she
have-
has them down more importantly.
The other thing that I have done is
Yeah.
that you asked for a report on same-day registration and the network connectivity
Oh.
issues. July.
Okay.
I thought that was the same of,
Okay, and so we got the budget. Those are the only new business items I had. And I did have one item, and if anybody else has a new business. And the calendar for the board, Allison raised this. Our next meeting is July 15th. I think Allison and Kevin may not be available. In that regard, also, usually the board doesn't have a meeting in August. So the question is, if Allison and Kevin are not here July 15th, and we probably won't have a meeting in August, The question is, do we want to have our board meeting in July, like maybe July 29th? In other words, move it closer to August to accommodate their absence and the fact that there may be something. If we don't meet from July 15th to September, that's a full 2 months almost. We want to like have the July meeting later, so there's not that much space between our meetings. Is that clear?
That's fine with me.
No, so whatever the board wants to do. You know.
That's fine with me.
Who's
Is the
making that?
22nd not good?
Well, the purpose was to make it closer to.
Is the 29th not good, is the question?
The 22nd, I won't be here.
Well,
If we do the 29th, will that work for you guys?
Yes.
Fine with
Is
us.
that better for you, Margaret? Allison?
The 29th,
Kevin?
perfect.
Okay, so we're now.
So we're gonna move the July meeting.
Yeah. Do we need a motion on that, or? No. So it's the consensus of the board. Our next meeting then will be July 29th at 2:30. And, we'll reserve our decision on whether to meet in August. Something may come up that we may have to meet, but generally we don't meet in August.
And we can, if it's only one topic, we can do it by phone, can't we?
Yes, we
As
can.
long as there's a public.
So let's reserve whether we're going to have a meeting in August until July 29th.
Okay.
Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
I won't be here in August.
Okay. Yeah, we generally, unless
we're
something
not due in
comes up,
August, right?
we generally don't meet in August.
Just want to get that clear.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I do.
Second?
Second.
Thank you all. We're adjourned.
Okay.
And welcome our new members that are not new anymore.